Not only standing on the podium, but you're all down here. I know a few of you for different reasons. I've been in West Virginia several times. It was probably 10, 15 years ago at least, since the last time I was here. So first of all, I'm honored to be invited back. I guess I didn't do too bad a job last time. So maybe some of you wanted to hear things I had to say again. Second of all, I understand that you all were saying you may want some program on alienation or parent-child contact problems, whatever we're going to call it. And we'll actually talk about that a little bit today, what to call it and how to think about it. Maybe not always what to do about it, because that's the hardest thing. And I know that's probably what you want, but that still is the hardest thing. Third thing I know is that West Virginia won last night. I heard that this morning when I woke up. I looked at the score, and congratulations. You might notice my team is on my wristband, and I thank West Virginia every day for giving us John Beeline, and curse West Virginia for giving us Rich Rodriguez. But other than that, we'll move on. My name is Dr. Phil Stahl. Please call me Phil. Please do not call me Dr. Phil. Dr. Stahl or Phil, either one, but not the other. Thank you. I'm very lucky to teach judges because, first of all, I've had wonderful opportunities doing that over the years. I've been with National Judicial College since 1996. I'm going to be teaching at a domestic violence course in Maine next weekend, 2 weeks. Week and a half from now. One of the things I love about teaching judges is you guys ask me the best questions of anybody. In fact, when I'm on the witness stand, you guys ask me the best questions of anybody. Much better than the lawyers do. Because you're asking me things that you want to know, rather than what the lawyers are trying to frame and get you to hear it. The second thing I love about teaching judges is you might know, those of you I met last night, I'm terrible with names, but this morning, everybody I can call just judge. So I don't have to worry about knowing names or not knowing names. Just a little bit about me, other than that I'm a Michigan fan. I grew up in Detroit and I've moved around a few times over the last, 35, 40 years. But now I live in San Diego, which is a lovely part of the country. Probably the best weather in the country, and probably definitely the reason my wife and I moved there. And I love to travel internationally as well, and I'm very happy that COVID is over enough that we've been able to get back to doing that. And thirdly, my day job, as I call it, was doing child custody evaluations as an expert appointed by the court. I've probably done about 1,000 of those over the years, a 40-year career of doing that. I'm doing very few of them now. And I think really my other favorite topic, I've got 3. My other favorite topic is on relocation. And the third favorite topic is all about bias and how that comes into play. And I'm going to bring a little bit of bias-related stuff in today as well. Please interrupt me and ask questions anywhere along the way if you want. I welcome that and I encourage that. The other thing I encourage is to be thoughtful about 2 things. What you're thinking about while I'm talking, but also how you're feeling during this program. Because in a little bit, I'm going to show you an 18-minute film. And we'll talk about that before I show the film. And give an opportunity to talk about maybe what you're feeling. Because I know that on the bench, you often have feelings that you can't show anybody. We all do. Me as a professional, I do too sometimes. When I'm doing an evaluation or I'm testifying, I have feelings. Right now, I'm reading a deposition on the way over here in a case that I'm involved in right now. And guess what kind of topic it is? Oh, alienation. And reading that deposition, I get very annoyed by one of the attorneys. Did that ever happen? You got a lawyer? You have the same kind of situation I do, in a different way. So be mindful of your feelings, because that helps us sort out how to separate our feelings from what we're thinking sometimes. So, I'm going to start this, and I have to be up here just because that's where my phone is and I'm looking at my notes. We're going to start this. You know, you all, I'm going to do an arrangement where you're collectively the judge in this case. And you saw these folks about 3 months ago, and you gave very little time. Do you all have enough time to do what you have to do? No, from what I understand. Sometimes you might have, what's the longest trials you've had?
12 days.
12 days? Okay.
12 hours.
12 hours? But some hearings are like 12 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Well, this hearing is going to be about 12 minutes. But just to refresh your memory, at the last hearing, which was about 12 minutes, you ordered that this boy named Tommy, who his mom and dad, and I might say mom, because this is an Australian film, mom and dad were in your courtroom, and they were arguing because dad had just gotten out of rehab. And you set orders of unsupervised time and move on from there. Every other weekend with dad. Changeovers at the park, and I don't want to hear from you guys again, because you can work it out and solve your problems. But, I take it back, it's not every other weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And the other thing is that each of these parties have new respective partners, and they were ordered not to come to the exchanges because of concerns that will become evident as we go along. So, I'm going to be acting on the part of both lawyers, which is really hard to do. This idea of setting the stage this way was introduced by a judge in Arizona named Bruce Cohen, who I've lived in Arizona for 13 years, and Bruce was an amazing judge. He's now the presiding family court judge. And he saw the film, and we were doing a program with him. The third person, when I say we, is my daughter, who is a lawyer also by training, although she's now at the University of Baltimore Law School executive director of a program there. But the three of us were going to do a program, and he introduced the idea of setting the stage before seeing the film like this. So we're in your courtroom today. We got about 10 minutes. And because I don't know somebody here to act the part of a different lawyer, it was fun doing the opposite of my daughter. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. I don't even play one on TV. But I do play one in this role play. So, Mom is going to start, okay? Everybody agreed that only the lawyers are going to make arguments. And then you're going to have to make a ruling. Because you're in court on an emergency hearing on Monday morning. Okay? We'll get into why in a few minutes. So, I'm going to start. Your Honor, I represent the mother in this matter, Allie Jenkins. Our request is that Sam Jenkins, the father, only have supervised visits. It's not safe for Tommy to live there. There's substance abuse still going on, despite your orders. He has an aggressive personality, and he's trying to turn Tommy against my client, Allie. Let me tell you about the changeovers. At changeovers, sometimes we find Tommy just lying on the ground, obviously scared that his father is coming to get him. He's curling up on the ground, can't get away until Allie picks him up. Sam always arrives late to changeovers. He hides in his bedroom before the changeovers, before having to go to Sam's, because he doesn't really want to go to Sam's. Sam brings Lucy to the changeovers even though you ordered her not to be there. And she sometimes causes problems. Recently, his lateness led to an altercation between the adults in front of Tommy. They were fighting over the phone, Allie's phone. Let me tell you about Lucy, Sam's partner. She can't even remember Tommy's name. She doesn't really want to have any relationship with him. She doesn't know how to have a relationship with him. My partner, Nicole, gets along great with Tommy. At dinner times, when after changeovers, when he's kind of quiet and sullen, she can get him to laugh. She can get him to have fun. And then he settles in and is doing fine. Now let me tell you the thing that I'm most concerned about, as if this wasn't enough. My client noticed a bruise on his elbow, on Tommy's elbow. And obviously, because it didn't happen at her house, it must have happened at Sam's house. Tommy wouldn't talk about it, because obviously he doesn't want to hurt his father. But the only logical conclusion is that Sam or Lucy is causing the problem and the bruise. Your Honor, again, I'm asking for supervised visitation. Thank you. You've heard arguments like that before? All right. So we did a pretty good job of setting this up. Now, I'm going to represent Sam. Okay? Sam vehemently disagrees with almost everything that you just heard. For example, when we went to the park to pick up Tommy, the first thing that happened is Mom just comes up and starts yelling at Dad, asked about the girlfriend at the changeover. She wasn't getting out of the car. She was quite a ways away in the car. No, that shouldn't be a problem. And when she says Tommy doesn't want to come, it's because she says terrible things about my client. As my client and Tommy peacefully walk to the car, Mom starts walking behind and taking video on her phone. When my client asks what she's doing, her response was, evidence, she shouldn't be here. Yes, at that point, when arguments started happening, my client's girlfriend did get out of the car, which she shouldn't have done. But it was only to help my client, who was being physically attacked by Mother. And then Mom called, pardon the language, Your Honor, Mom calls my client's girlfriend a fucking moron in front of Tommy. Only in family court do we hear these things, right? But that's what happened. When things settle down and my client can get Tommy into the car and they start to drive off, Mom hovers over the car until my client can pull away. It's as if she doesn't want to allow Tommy to transition peacefully to my client. When they get home, everything's fine. Tommy has a great time. He said he likes being with his dad. He wants to be able to play soccer with his dad. My client loves Tommy so much. When my client and Tommy are together, they have a great time playing soccer, video games. My client is very nurturing. He cooks for him. He puts him to bed. He's very affectionate. Of course, he would help Tommy with schoolwork if he had Tommy during the school week. What's perhaps most disturbing is that Tommy just recently had a terrible bruise on his elbow after a changeover. The bruise didn't happen at my client's home, so it must have happened at Allie's home. But Tommy wouldn't talk about it. He doesn't want to hurt his mother. We know Mom still thinks my client is using drugs, but he's not. He's very happy to continue testing if that's what you want. Anything he can do to gain the court's trust. But most importantly, we believe that Mom is alienating Tommy because of all the terrible things she said about my client to Tommy. Your Honor, in conclusion, my client understands that Tommy's suffering from the changeover problems. I'm not going to dispute that. We want there to be an alternative in meeting at the park. Perhaps I could do at the beginning and end of school, something like that, allowing Tommy to use school as a buffer to avoid Mom and Dad being in the same place together. Thank you for listening. I'm sure you're going to do the right thing for Tommy. Okay, judges, how would you rule? How many people would rule, because this is all you're going to get, right? Sometimes you don't get more. Or if the parties talk, they say the same thing anyway. How many people are thinking about reinstating supervised visitation? Going once? Going twice? How many of you thinking about supervised exchanges or having the exchange through school?
I wouldn't do it for school, use additional time, but I do a monitored place.
Monitored place, okay. Any other comments? Just your hands are up. Okay. How many would grant Dad more time? A few. Now the one hand went up, a few more went up. Anybody want to explain why, please?
Well, I'm assuming they're still in the same school district, so the Friday after school, let the child go home with Dad, Dad has the child on the weekend, and Dad gets the child to school on Monday morning.
That's exactly what
He
I
certainly
said.
had, they're close enough to each other that would arrangement would work.
You take out the mom and dad meeting to do the exchanges.
Any other comments about why Dad may be some more time?
Was he asking for more time, or was it the emergency?
He was asking for more time.
I thought the emergency hearing was because she wanted to supervise this.
She wanted to supervise it, he wanted to increase it.
Oh, I didn't know.
Okay. But you're an emergency hearing, right? Yes.
The mom's attorney's presentation caused me some concern that there may be some things that mom's doing to influence Tommy negatively. The report about he won't leave his room, he throws himself on the ground, those kinds of things. They could indicate fear of going to Dad's, but that's kind of negated by the good time he has when he's at Dad's. So that makes me think that Mom's trying to influence him, and Tommy's behaviors are in reaction to what Mom's doing more than what Dad's doing.
Okay. Very reasonable hypothesis.
Ideally, we could appoint a guardian ad litem to investigate, but probably they don't both qualify, so.
So you could appoint a guardian ad litem
If they both qualify.
if they qualify. I don't know what allows you to, what people have to do to qualify for that here. Maybe that'll come up later as we talk about brainstorming solutions. But certainly that's an option. I will say that in this situation, the court decided to appoint a evaluator, report writer as they're called in Australia. And you'll see a very, very brief scene with the report writer and Tommy. Any other comments?
I think I would order some sort of counseling for Tommy. I mean, really, it seems in this situation, it's hard to really know what to do with this. But regardless, it sounds like he's going to need help. And so I would probably do that. I would probably try to figure out ways to minimize interaction. So the school pickups would be one way. I don't think I'd expand or reduce either parents' time any kind, saying which one you believe. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure.
So you raise a few points. You don't know who to believe. You don't know whether or not time should be expanded or supervised, but you're pretty sure that Tommy would benefit from counseling of some kind.
And I might cheat and use that a little bit for fact finding.
And you might use it for fact finding, although we can talk about whether that puts the therapist in a bad spot, because a therapist for a child needs to get the trust of both parents and the child. And if fact finding is part of that, it's kind of like, is that going to work? And sometimes it works great, but sometimes it blows up as soon as the effort at fact finding makes one parent or the other upset, or makes Tommy upset. Okay, so these are considerations. By the way, I think like a custody evaluator. You guys are thinking like judges. So if I say that's a reasonable hypothesis, like I did earlier, that's because I'm looking for multiple hypotheses. And we'll be talking all morning about that concept. Yes?
Bill, I always consult with the therapist about what hat they want to wear, what hat they're comfortable wearing. If it's a therapy hat for the child, only if it's a therapy hat for the family, if they're comfortable doing that. If it's a fact-finding hat, the therapist has to be consulted about what their role is going to be.
I think that's a great point. The therapist had, I just remembering that this is being recorded, so I want to repeat much of what I hear. The idea that consulting with the therapist before appointing the therapist for what hat, a fact-finding hat, a child therapy hat, a family therapy hat, or some combination of that is often a good thing to do. But again, we're in an emergency hearing. So you're not going to do that necessarily before you got to do something today. Now, how often, oh yes.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would do this necessarily for the emergency, but it may lead to then the forensic evaluation.
A forensic evaluation of some kind.
Which again, you get cited in, by the way, by our, when we use the Charleston a lot, so on parental alienation. But if you just say, he said something bad about me, or about that, it doesn't trigger it. But if this goes down the path of there really is alienation, then, or there really is possible abuse, then instead of just a therapist for the child, which that's a great resource as well, but then if you do the forensic, then you've got the neutral person to check out the whole thing.
So down the road, you're thinking you might want to be having a forensic appointed. And like I say, what we're going to see, you're going to see kind of that happening. One more comment, and I'll move on. Yes?
The thing that caught my attention in your recitation of the facts was, and if it is true, assuming it is true, was the parent hovering over the car. And what I think a lot of people don't realize, parental alienation is very subtle a lot of times. It's not overt. And I think the first thing I would want to do would be to try to minimize the exchange or change something about the child exchange. The child sees the mother crying or having some kind of emotional event at the exchange. Of course, that's alienation, but they never say anything. And that's very much akin to like a parent scheduling things during visitation with the child, and then have to cancel it because they have to go on visitation. That's a subtle thing.
So I know the topic is alienation, and we're going to get to all these kinds of ideas, but absolutely your hypothesis is that the mother hovering over the car, if she's saying negative things, those are all things that could be presupposing some kind of alienation that we need to sort out. But again, you're in an emergency hearing, you can't sort it out now. But the idea of a forensic to help sort it out, the idea of a therapist to help maybe calm it down before it gets to that point, are all great suggestions. How often do you actually get to know what's going on? He's got everything framed by attorneys or parents. And I use the word framed on purpose. What does framing do? It's attempt to influence you. In that regard, it's like a bias. Because biasing is what influences us, things that might influence us to make decisions rapidly. And framing is what attorneys do really, really well. Did another program on bias with an attorney and judge, both of whom are from Australia. We did this at AFCC several years ago, and framing was a big part of what we talked about. So I'm going to tell you about Tommy. Tommy is a film from Australia. It depicts a short period of time in Tommy's life, as well as some changeovers. Tommy was written by one of my best friends in Melbourne, Australia. By the way, international travel, that's often where I go. Just so you know, I'm going to be speaking 3 times in Australia in November and December on this topic. You get 3 hours. I did a program for children's attorneys. They're called Minors Council in California, in Northern California for 2 hours. I'm going to do all a day program in the 3 different cities in Australia. My friend Darren made a film, and by the way, a children's book, paperback book about Tommy. And this depiction is what we're imagining happened before those arguments were said. In fact, the arguments came out of the film, right? What we know is a part of the film. Darren's a lawyer by day. His day job is being a barrister, so he presents evidence to you guys all the time, to judges. And he's an actor, writer, producer. I don't know if he sleeps. He's got the most wonderful wife and adult children because they've allowed him to do all of this for many, many, many years. The film uses typical Aussie language. Some of you might be offended by that language. I hope not. We're all adults. But I got permission to show it anyway, in case. Because I know that you normally wouldn't use this kind of language in front of teaching judges. But in the film, there's only one country that wouldn't allow us to show the film because of some of the scenes. But it wasn't the language that made it for that. More important than anything, is what I said at the beginning, I urge you to also pay attention to what you're feeling. I'll note that some of you have strong reactions, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of you are so well guarded in your reactions, like a lot of us professionals, you may forget to feel. I actually would like you to feel, if you can. Are we going to be able to turn lights out?
I can try.
Didn't even think about asking that question before we said that. There we go. Thank you. Oh, one last thing. There's closed captioning in this film, and my daughter is the one who did that. Part of her job at University of Baltimore Law School, she has access to a program that can do closed captioning, and she has taught in programs where there are deaf people in the audience, and she feels that every program, every video that she shows should have closed captioning. So this was done by her, to give her credit for it. About 18 minutes, by the way.
What is it? Captain Tommy! 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 Dirtied yourself again. Sorry. Did you have breakfast? What'd you have? Eggs? God, is that all Dad ever makes you? But you also made those horrible pancakes that come out of the packet. I think Dad knows better than to be giving you all that crap.
So did you ask him if his history is claim?
Girls.
Oh, you need to find out, otherwise it doesn't matter. As long as the judge knows there's substance abuse, he doesn't have a chance. And if he rehabilitates,
She won't let him. Just makes it tolerable to fuck each other.
sweet and fun.
Hey, why don't you go get me pajamas and help set the table? month they want to expand the student numbers in the classrooms. Can they do that?
Well, that's what I asked, but no one can seem to give me an actual answer.
That can't be good for kids.
No.
Oh, I will get us another. Hey, watch them.
What's going on here? Oh, we're just having dinner. It's all right.
Come on, buddy. Time to get out.
What's this? Who did this to you? And go to sleep.
Is that okay with you?
See you, Maxine. But now you know, right?
Yeah, thanks. Tommy!
Let's go, I'm late.
Yeah, no, I'm really sorry just for hearing something and then going straight into the
Hey, Jim.
What the fuck?
Well, good afternoon to you too, darling.
You were meant
Just mind your language in front of the
20
boy.
minutes ago.
Can we just
Now
stop
I'm
right
late
now?
for a
That's giving me a
meeting.
headache.
Another night out on the piss, hey?
You're his mother, not mine.
What the fuck is she doing here?
Come on. Ali, please. Stop. She's not bothering anyone.
You're a changeover.
She's not holding my hand, for Christ's sake. She's 15 metres away in a car, which is more that can be said
Court
for you
orders.
when you drop a
Court
white boy
orders.
with that boondagger.
Nothing you can do about it.
Yeah? We'll see about that.
Just so you know, I could barely convince him to get in the car and come here.
Yeah, because of all that BS you keep feeding him. Come on. Say hi to Lucy. Jesus, what are you doing?
Evidence.
Huh?
She shouldn't be here.
Hey! Hey! Let go of him! Get back in the car, you're not part of this.
Tommy, you fucking moron. Tommy!
That's it. Like a good hand. Give back my phone! You better not tag along next time. Hey, mate.
Oh, looking good. Hey, buddy. Come on, you're home now. Come on, you can take these dirty things off. Did you really want to not come here, huh? I thought you liked visiting your dad. So, why did Mum say that? Says all sorts of things that aren't true, huh?
Hey, why don't you show Tommy what you got him?
Soon. We've got some catching up to do. I miss you so much, little bugger.
Heads up!
Fuck. I said later.
Okay.
It's fine. I don't know. Huh? You think you deserve a present? Alright, fine.
You and Dad can have a little kick in the backyard, yeah? What do you think?
Yeah. Hey. Come on, mate. Imagine if you could be here all the time. I mean, you could become as good as Ronaldo. Wouldn't that be cool? Then just tell Mummy that you want to spend time with Daddy. I love you. You're the most important person in my life. We'll just finish this later, okay?
Hey, Tommy, hey, why don't you go put your bag in your room, mate? Yeah, lunch is almost ready.
Yes, that's it! Drive! Good! Oh, good one! Get the grenades, get the grenades! Where's that? Hey! Oh! Look at how it's coming up behind you! Yes! There you go. Oh, getting heavy. Hey. What happened, buddy? We'll talk about it tomorrow. Alright? Night, buddy. Hey, ready? Come on, up. It's okay. Thomas, in the car.
things in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. Find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. And I feel the way that every child should. Sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, look right through.
Lights can go back. When my daughter watched it the first time, she said to me, I thought he was going to be dead. Thank goodness that didn't happen. Feelings? Before we get to other stuff? Cheese. That's one of the things I've heard.
I've had similar things been told to me myself.
I had similar things told to me in my courtroom.
I had a doctor who ran over his wife's foot in the car and then took off with it. I mean, these people we were just talking about, they see how people, they have means, they have money, they have nice cars, they have, you know, it really doesn't matter when you can act that way. Like you.
So again, the people can act like this. It doesn't matter whether they're poor, medium, rich. Doctor run over his wife with a car and a foot, the wife's foot. The kid was in the car. You often don't get the evidence though, do you? Yeah.
That's right. We get the framing.
You get the framing.
It's not often that we get to see the actual story like this. So certainly, this would make our decisions easier because we have more of the story. We're able to visually see it versus what we get in the courtroom, which you would never get the truth about the bruises, you know, that you got there. You know, maybe the psychologist or the counselor get to, you know, why he's bruising himself.
Maybe.
That it probably take 3 or 4 hearings or half a year to really get to the bottom of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you don't get the evidence like you see in this film. And again, this film is a dramatization, but it's a dramatization of what you see every day in your courtroom. But that's not about how you feel.
Horrified.
Horrified. Yeah, and yeah.
Crying,
Crying, all of it, yeah. Do you hear stuff in court that gets you to feel like crying? All the time, right? Anybody in this room care about kids? Probably all you do. You know, you can't do family law without caring about kids. Plain and simple. Can't be a forensic if you don't care about kids. I've seen some that don't seem like they care about kids, but that's a different issue altogether. I've only seen a few family court judges who don't care about kids, and they rotated out of family court as fast as they could. California, Arizona, among many states, they don't have dedicated family court judges. They rotate every 1, 2, 3 years, depending on the judge and depending on the court. I don't know, you're a dedicated family court judge, right? That's what I thought, if I remembered right, I knew you were. By the way, the first judge I ever met from West Virginia was Sally Jackson, and I understand she's retired. And Sally was in a course I was teaching at National Judicial College called Managing Challenging Family Law Cases. And we had that was in Reno, and we had a field trip, if you will, for dinner to Tahoe. So we were on a bus, and I was sitting next to Sally, and we just started chatting. Come to find out, she's from the town I was born in, Oil City, Pennsylvania. And her mom knew my dad's uncle. Weird, really weird. I don't know if they dated a little bit or what, but she knew the name, the Stahl name, because of Oil City, Pennsylvania. Sally was great, and she was instrumental, I think, for me coming here the first time. What are the feelings, other than horrified, crying, etc.? And how common it is that you feel this way.
Defeated, because both
Defeated.
parents are crap.
Both parents are crap. I've been waiting for that. In the minors council training, one of the lawyers who played mom's lawyer for me, he basically wanted to say, well, those kids, that kid should probably be in foster care. But is that a solution? From what we know about foster care? Probably not. You need a lot worse than this. Especially if you found out about the bruise. Is there anybody that doesn't know now how the bruise happened? Because sometimes there's so much going on, you miss it. He did it himself, yeah. And why do you think a child would do that to himself? What's he feeling?
It's just like any other self-injurious behavior. You're trying to distract from what the real pain is.
Beautifully said. Just like any other self-destructive behavior, injuring behavior, self-harming behavior, you're trying to distract from what you're feeling. Totally, absolutely true. Because feelings get overwhelming. And when feelings are overwhelming, we have to act in some way to divert attention. Self-harm is a common way. I was a therapist once in my life for many, many years. Child therapist for many, but also saw adults. And I saw an adult with I don't know what it's called now, I'm blocking on it. But back in the day it was called multiple personality disorder. And she had several personalities. It's dissociative disorder is what it's called now. And from a life of horrible, horrible abuse. And she had ongoing, regular self-harming behaviors when things got to be too much for her. And that started in childhood, of course. How might you rule differently now? If at all. The people who wanted supervised exchanges, you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that you knew. You knew that intuitively, that made sense. Absolutely. Do they both engage in what I will now call, when we get to this topic, alienating behaviors? What were some of Mom's other than what had been mentioned already?
She's talking about the case within earshot. She had to know he could hear her.
Talking about the case in earshot of the kid, absolutely. Parents, I as a forensic, I ask parents, so where do you think the kids are when this is going on? How do you think what do they hear? Oh no, they don't hear any of it. My mom and dad argued, like maybe many adults did and do today. They didn't get divorced. They had a joke about that. My mom would say to my brother and sister, my brother heard it, I heard it, I don't know if my sister ever heard it. She was in the middle. And, your dad and I talked about getting divorced, but I told him to take the kids, and he told me to take the kids, and we decided to stay together. But my mother thought she had a sense of humor. But my sister and I, when they were fighting, and we were in bed, right? We were on the stairs listening to the fight. And they never knew it. But we always heard it. What else did you learn about either parent's behavior that might be called alienating behavior? She disrespected his cooking choices. Is that all he feeds you? He knows better than give you that crap, right? And now we're still talking about Allie. What else? Either parent, what else?
Dad's doing that whole, I'll tell your mom, tell him you want more time with me stuff.
Dad's saying, just tell mommy that you want to see daddy more. You want to come live with dad. And I'll help you be the greatest soccer player in the world. You all know who Ronaldo is, the greatest soccer player in the world, other than Pele when I was growing up. That's who that was. And now it's Ronaldo. And he said, you could be like Ronaldo. But what's that about the soccer ball?
We had two.
That's what Dad wants to do, is look at the kids.
Yeah, not only,
He's protecting.
well, Dad may want to do it, but Dad doesn't do it. That's why it was unopened in the closet, and now he's got another unopened one in the closet. Tommy knows what's going on. Absolutely. The first thing Dad said, you know, you can take out those dirty shoes here now. You're home, right? I mean, parents do this kind of, pardon my language, crap all the time. There's no doubt about it. And some children, you know, this is not a political statement at all, but people used to refer to Ronald Reagan as the Teflon president. Whatever was said about it, whatever he did, just bounced off, right? Like Teflon. Some kids are Teflon kids. It just bounces off, boom. Bye, Mom, I'm off to Dad. And other kids are like this. They're overwhelmed. And it's sometimes related to what's going on by the parents, but it's sometimes the kid and their temperament. We want to pay attention to that as well. And you often don't hear about kids and their temperament because you got lawyers framing stuff other than Tommy's a frightened boy or Tommy's a happy, playful boy everywhere else. Just as an aside, I'm going to want to know as an evaluator, and I'm thinking you're going to want to know as a judge, how does this kid with his friends? How is this kid with his extracurricular activities? How is this kid in school when he's away from mommy and daddy and they're fighting, right? Those are almost, when we start talking about the kid, the first things I ask about the kid. How is he doing away from the two of you? I got a relocation case going on in Minnesota right now. I sometimes get appointed in other jurisdictions. And in this Minnesota case, licensing can sometimes be a problem with that, but when it's not a problem with that, I can do it. In Minnesota, I can do it because I'm not licensed in that state. But they'll allow a psychologist to come in up to 30 days a year, and then I can do it. So Dad tells me kids don't, especially the older girl, doesn't want to go to Mom's. She wants to come home with me first before going to Dad. Come on. Because they have a 2-2-5 plan, and they exchange at school. And he says that the kid doesn't want to do that. And I asked him, why do you think that is? And he thinks, of course, it's something about Mom. Switch now to Mom. She tells me, Sophie just doesn't want to go to Dad's right from school. She always wants to come home first. Why do you think that is? Because she's not happy at Dad's. By the way, Sophie is wonderfully happy at both homes. Sophie loves both parents. She's the oldest of 3 siblings, so she's a little bit caretaker, which is part of the problem for her, because that's what's called a parentified child. But it turns out what it's really about is I want to see the parent I've been with just a little bit more before I switch houses. And switching at school just doesn't feel right. Now our younger brothers don't care. Whatever, you know, especially the 3-year-old. This is why I do this work, because this 3-year-old is the most amazing little kid. And he just, if he were walking in this room, he'd light up the room, he'd be asking everybody your name, and he'd remember it, and he'd tell you all kinds of things, and he'd say, oh, Phil, I want to show you this. And, you know, it's just full of life. So these are important things. You don't get to see those kids like that, do you? Certainly not the young ones. Do you interview the older ones? You do. 7-year-old? Probably not. 9-year-old? Maybe. Okay. Do you think you get, how dare I use this word, the truth when you interview those kids? Probably not. And what I would say is, how do I know? How do I know if I'm getting the truth? Now, a couple more things about the film. Did Tommy talk? What did he say? What's wrong? At the very beginning of the film, in a submarine, and he never spoke another word. What happens is when he shrugs his shoulders or shakes his head, parents project onto that what that means. They think they know what that means. They don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. You can tell I'm back in teaching judges mode because I'm cutting out all my adjectives that we normally use in everyday conversation, especially in Australia. Okay? They don't have a clue. So they project what they're imagining onto what they believe from the kids. And then they tell their lawyers, and then the lawyers frame it as truth. For you guys. Tell me about Tiger Terry. What do you think?
I wish we had one of those to give.
Wish we had one of those to give to kids. Well, actually, I know courts that have sometimes given, although that's usually only an adoption court and family court, they give stuffed animals to every adopted kid. You know, but perhaps a stuffed animal would help just comfort that child. I did ask Darren, by the way, Tiger Terry, aren't you worried about copyright with Calvin and Hobbes? And he said, what's Calvin and Hobbes? He didn't know about it down in Australia. I guess he wasn't worried about copyright. But Tiger Terry serves as comfort to him and helps him out of his problems. And also, he must have been feeling kind of anxious with that report writer, right? And by the way, that's not uncommon to have a kid just looking like that when they're in my office. And it's very common that they just blab away. You just don't know. It depends on the case, right? But we saw Tiger Terry, he brightened up. And of course, Tiger Terry is his imagination. It's like a pretend friend, imaginary friend. Kind of like Hobbes and Calvin and Hobbes, which Darren didn't know about. By the way, Tiger Terry was played by Darren. He's a tall man, about 4 inches taller than me. What do y'all think of the submarine? Scary. What else?
Tiger Terry saved him.
Tiger Terry
Saved him.
Tiger Terry saved him in the submarine, yeah.
It's isolated.
Isolated. He's very alone, in the dark.
Underwater.
Yeah, underwater.
Under attack.
Under attack. What was that?
Turmoil all around.
Terrible all around.
Turmoil.
Oh, turmoil all around. Absolutely. That was not in the original script. No idea what we're going to do to show some of this stuff. And the director, and this is what I learned about filmmaking, directors sometimes are the most inventive people around. He said, you know, this scene would really work great if it could be in a submarine. Now, just so you know, geographically, Melbourne's about an hour, hour and a half from the nearest larger body of water where a submarine could be, okay, down near Phillip Island. Although Aaron has a summer home, or a second home down in Phillip Island, they weren't filming down there at that time, planning to film down there. Well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to get a submarine? And the director said, I'll work on it. And lo and behold, there was a submarine in the waters outside of Melbourne when they were going to be planning to film the movie. And he got permission for one day to film on that submarine and incorporate it into the whole movie. This movie would have had impact, lots of impact, but a different impact if it didn't have that submarine scenes. My final comment about the movie, unless somebody else wants to. What do you think of Ari Newman? Boy, what an actor, huh? So, again, it's a depiction of what we often see. Now I'll tell you the backstory of the film. Darren once represented a parent whose child was having maybe delusional thoughts and seeing an imaginary friend type thing. And nobody knew what was going on with this boy. If in fact he was delusional, if in fact it was just an imaginary friend, like it's kind of normal for that age, right? If you all remember, you might want to show of hands, you might not want to do it. How many had an imaginary friend somewhere between 7 and 10? Yeah, lots of us. Because that's normative at that age. Absolutely. And actually, when my daughter was studying the role of the child's voice in family and dependency court, back when she got a Fulbright to go to New Zealand and do that down there, because there's this little thing called the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. You may have heard of it. You may have heard that we're not a signatory to that. But New Zealand apparently was one of the countries that honored it the best, and she wanted to study it down there. And that's where she actually did some of her research about imaginary friends that children sometimes have. So this film just has some brilliant things going on with that. I don't tell you some of this just because I like the film so much. I tell you some of this to kind of get beyond our feelings. Okay? Because if we stayed stuck in our feelings, we wouldn't learn anything. We wouldn't be able to talk about it anymore. But we need to do that. There's no doubt about that. And because I just got a text, I forgot it's after 9. I gotta put my phone back on Do Not Disturb. Okay. So, have you all heard about this? Children affected by parental relationship distress? That is what is in the DSM-5. Parental alienation is not. Parental alienation syndrome is not. The closest they would come to appease the person who really kept trying to push and push and push for PAS in the last 3 editions is what's called a V code. A V code really isn't a diagnosis, but what it is it identifies something that we mental health people see and what the basis of it might be. But it's just, again, it's not a diagnosis. But it's because of the parental relationship discord that the child is having so much distress. I think if we were going to look at this film in the view of DSM-5, we would think of maybe this and maybe one other. Because there are diagnoses related to trauma. And we certainly might see a diagnosis related to trauma. But it would certainly fall into this category for sure. So now I'm going to talk about the different words we use. I said we have used over the years that probably have us all confused by now. So what is it? How do we know if it's alienation? How do we know if it's estrangement? How do we know if there's an alignment going on? How do we know if it's normative? How do we know if it's problematic? How do we know if one parent is causing the problem? How do we know if multiple things cause the problem? You'll never know in a 10 or 15 minute hearing. I'll just say it that way. You might have hypotheses, absolutely. And some of the initial comments were more focused on what mom's bad behavior was than dad's bad behavior. Don't know why, but that's okay. That's just kind of what's going on, right? Because when we think about hypotheses, we have a lot of them. But alienation is the result of some kind of attempted psychological manipulation of a child to have unwarranted feelings that are really negative feelings toward the other parent. With a prior history of a very good relationship and a prior history of no major problems at all. Do we know if Tommy had no major problems with his relationship with Dad? No, of course not. Do we know if he had no major problems in his relationship with Mom? Probably not, but no one is questioning whether or not Tommy loves Mom. Mom is questioning whether Dad's good enough, and Dad's questioning whether Mom is causing Tommy's feelings. Estrangement is when we've got clear reasons for a child to feel the way the child feels. But it doesn't just have to be that there was abuse. Identified abuse. Identified from a child welfare organization, or identified in the court, or identified by a pediatrician. And I say that because of the deposition I was just reading yesterday, because the expert on the other side of this case thinks that all parental alienation is parental alienation unless there's clear evidence of abuse. I will disavow you of that thinking by noon today. What estrangement is that if there's some problems, those problems might have to do with substance use, it might have to do with mental health problems, it might have to do with high conflict, it might have to do with kind of what I'll call bad parenting, but not abusive parenting, insensitive parenting, maybe sometimes verbally abusive, maybe occasionally physically, just like, slapping at the kid. You should see the look on the face of one of the judges up here. Because apparently the dad did this in the case that I'm reading about, and he admits to doing that. But he says, yeah, I've had a little problem with my anger, but now it's under control. Have you ever heard that before? So that's part of what estrangement is. And then you got alignment. And what alignment is you got normal relationships between people where there's just kind of aligned a little bit more with one parent or the other. And that often changes over time. A 5-year-old boy I saw in a relocation case years ago, he was clear that until he was about 4 years old, he was so close to Mom. And how he loved his mom, and how sensitive she was, and how wonderful she was, and all the things she did with him and for him and all that. And then when he talked about Dad at age 5, his eyes lit up and said, "That's my dad." And there's this way in which some of that is age sensitive, because that's normative also, for these alignments to shift over time. A friend of mine is a lawyer in Northern California, where I lived for 18 years. And he has a now adult daughter, and I first met her when she was an infant, because they were at a conference. We were all at a conference together in New Orleans. And she had a great relationship with Mom, and kind of like Dad, for many, many years. And somewhere around age 9, all of a sudden, Dad and she had a Saturday outing where he took her to Home Depot. And she loved going to Home Depot with Dad. And all of a sudden, Mom's kind of out of the picture a little bit more. And by 14, when she no longer is interested in all those cool gadgets at Home Depot, and she's really into ballet, guess who kind of became the favored parent a little bit again? Mother. Although they both really, really supported her ballet. And Mom was thrilled that her and Dad went to Home Depot, because she had a date all to herself. Mom was a stay-at-home bookkeeper type person. So I want you to think about these terms, but then you're going to have people coming in and talking about parental alienation. And when parental alienation comes up the way it's coming up now, it's the view of some experts. I don't want to say they're wrong, but they're wrong. except when they're right. Now that really makes a lot of sense, right? And I'll explain that by noon. That thinking is dyadic thinking. It's either alienation, parental alienation, or it's not. That's the dyad. Either or. And you know what I often say about humans? We're kind of messy. And I'm not talking about pig time. We're kind of messy. Humans going through family law conflict are really, really messy. And nothing is that simple. If we try to make it simple, that might be a heuristic, which is something that is part of cognitive bias that allows humans to oversimplify things because it's just easier. Can't deal with complexity. And I live my life of embracing the complexity and sorting it all out. It's probably why I like doing child custody evaluations, because I get to do that, to try and sort out what the heck is going on here. And just like the framing of lawyers, when I see parents the first time, we'll stop in about 5 to 10 minutes, by the way. When I see parents the first time, mom or dad is telling me a very convincing story. They framed it the way they see it. And my wife is used to this, because I come home and say, well, and that's what I heard today in this first interview. And we both say, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to hear next when I hear the other parent. And it's diametrically opposed, right? And that's what we deal with. But there are a lot of reasons that children might have rejecting behavior other than parental alienation. I'm going to talk about the second one for a minute and the third one. Second one is just a child enmeshed with an emotionally dependent, needy parent with some role reversal. When I started as a child therapist, back when I was a child in 1971, I wasn't quite a child, still. When I started as a child therapist, and I worked at a child guidance clinic, and we saw kids that wouldn't go to school, and we called it school phobia. All the research on school phobia in the 50s and 60s suggested that the problem was one of an enmeshment between the child and parent. And the child was afraid to leave, typically mom, that's who the research was done with, because the child was afraid of leaving mom, because mom would be alone, would be scared, would be all those things, right? So she had to stay home to take care of mom emotionally. It's what we would call a parentified child. In that context of alienation, the parent-child contact problem, which is the way I prefer to call all these cases, we can call a refusal. But actually, parent-child contact problem is the most neutral phrase we have. And I'm a big believer in calling things as neutrally as we can so that we're not biased into thinking of it in the direction of the allegation. If we think of them as alienation cases, we're already thinking about that dyad. It's alienation or it's not. If we think about it as parent-child contact problems, we've got lots of hypotheses about what might be going on. So that child who is enmeshed with mom might be afraid to go to dad, not because of anything that she's done overtly or covertly. Because you're right, Allie does some pretty covert things. But she does them out of her anxiety, not out of her enmeshment. We've got some parents that do that out of their enmeshment. And worse yet, we've got something called folie à deux. And it's not the winery in Northern California, if you've had their wine. but it's a psychiatric concept called a delusion shared by two. I once saw a girl that was about 12 when I saw her, and I saw her a couple different times over the years. And Dad was absolutely convinced Mom alienated the child. And Mom, early on, thought Dad sexually abused the kid. And the kid thought she was sexually abused. Now, I didn't see her then, but the history was clear on that, right? And Dad fought that every chance he could to go back into court and try and increase his time, get some time, increase his time. And Mom would always say, if she wants to go with you, I'm perfectly happy to let her go with you. But she doesn't want to go. Possible red flag, but we don't know what it's about. Maybe definitely a red flag, but still we don't know what it's about. So I hear about this, and I don't do sex abuse evaluations, so I made it clear I'm not going to touch that question. What I'm going to touch on or try and tackle is why now, when something might have happened or not happened about 9 years earlier. So whether there's some trauma going on, whether there's other things going on. And I kind of had the opinion that there's this kind of delusion that they both had, that they shared between each other. It was the way they connected was through this delusion about Dad. Long, sad story short, saw her again at 14. I didn't see her at 16, but I knew that the court had ordered what I'll tell you about, this 4-day program. Have you all heard about that? If you haven't, I'll be explaining some of that. Boy, I got a lot to do after the break. And at 18, I get a letter from her. Now, I rarely hear from parents or kids years later. But I did hear from her. And she thanked me for listening. I was one of the few people that kind of understood her. Why she thought I understood her was beyond me. But she thought I understood her, but I listened clearly. Because I'm really good at that, I think. And then she says, I just turned 18, and now no one can make me see my dad again. That's a bad outcome, right? So, on that happy story, I got 10:25. When we come back about 10:40. Is that all right? Enjoy your birthday.